When the Menopause Foundation of Canada laid out some stuff, and I actually did some other research, is wow, we need to actually look out for cardiovascular health because you're changing the hormone levels. You need to look at bone health as well because you're changing the hormone levels as well. So in terms of my background, that's where the exercise really kicks in, and because we could do stuff to keep the cardiovascular health going. We could do some stuff to keep the bone health, because one of the big ways to do bone health is actually resistance training or muscular conditioning, because the muscles will help out for the bones to be healthy as well.
Welcome to All Things Menopausal. My name is Mary, and I'm a menopause doula. As a doula, we augment the healthcare profession as menopause support practitioners. I created this podcast, All Things Menopausal, to build community for women going through menopause transition and to foster resilience through the stories that connect, educate, and empower. These stories are real, raw, relatable, and they're very much relevant to the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual whole person that we are. In our midlife transition, we are not alone. Each week, you will hear from courageous, vulnerable, and knowledgeable guests sharing their passion, their journey, and lived experience. These are little clues to finding solutions to our unique situation. The menopause symptoms are personal, but the experience is universal. Welcome back, my listeners. In today's episode, we're going to have an interesting conversation about women's health and the menopause journey through the eyes of Francois Gagnon. But our conversation is going to first begin with his life-changing moment. As he was flipping through the news channels one night, there was a segment that happened to catch his attention featuring a doctor from Toronto, and she was discussing a pressing issue in women's health, which is a significant lack of support and resources, as well as the disparities in education around hormonal changes for women. Now, Francois, who is a professional deeply rooted in health and wellness, was immediately drawn into this conversation. And he recognized there is an opportunity for him to make a difference. Francois has a rich background in functional movement and hormonal education. And he recognized he could actually use his skills to help women through their menopausal journey. So Francois embarked on a mission to close up the gap, this information and education gap. And this revelation of his sparked a profound interest, leading him to discover Menopause Expert Group, MEG. And this is how I found Francois. Francois' involvement with the menopause awareness movement is a testament to his passion for health and wellness. It also highlights the power that knowledge and the role that experts in the world can make in breaking down the barriers for women's health by advocating access for more research, resources, and opening up more conversations around women's health. So I'm so glad that you're here to join us in our story as it unfolds, and the unexpected moment of curiosity that led Francois to become a beacon of support and education in the domain of menopausal health and help shedding the light on the importance of access to information. But before we get started, here's a few things you need to know about Francois. Francois is based in Calgary, Alberta, and he's the chief medical exercise specialist and a certified cancer exercise specialist, as well as a certified lymphatic therapist and pfilAtes specialist at his clinic called the Other Pain Clinic. Yes, I said pfilAtes, and he will explain more what that's all about. He has over 15 years of experience, and he specializes with individuals with chronic pain and health conditions, including individuals who've gone through a cancer journey. He also helps people find energy and better mobility in their everyday activities. And he integrates manual therapies, medical exercise coaching, health lifestyle coaching, and supportive nutrition coaching to empower his clients towards their health and wellness goals. Fun fact, Francois and I are two of approximately 14 licensed menopause champions here in Canada. So you ask, what is MEG? Well, you'll just have to stay tuned in to learn more. Francois, I am really thrilled to have you on the show. We have a lot in common, and we're going to talk about that. And it has to do with becoming a licensed menopause champion. How does one become a champion? We'll tell you later. But Francois, I'm really grateful to have you on here because we're going to talk about a lot of things about our health in particular, the pelvic floor health.
Awesome.
Yeah. How does a man take interest in menopause? Tell us all about that.
So it was interesting. I was just kind of hanging out on the couch. I was kind of flipping through the channels, and I was going, "Oh, hey, they're talking about menopause. Let me just sit down and pay attention." And they were interviewing a key doctor. I forget her name. Sorry, you probably have to look that one up. Out of Toronto, she's one of the kind of gurus in the menopause world, and she's actually saying that for menopause in Canada, there's going to be a lack of access to resources, services, and professionals or something along those lines. And I'm going, this is kind of interesting. Then the interview kind of said, hey, some people are talking more about menopause. Like there's some plays and some dramas that are coming about it and kind of poking fun into it, but kind of in the educational way. So I'm going, this is kind of cool, getting the message out.
Okay.
And then I found out about Menopause Foundation of Canada. So I checked out their website, and they did a cool study in October 2022 about what's going on from a women's perspective about signs and symptoms, and also what's happening in the medical circle. Because sometimes is there support from my family doctor? Like yes, no kind of thing. What type of support? Or is it kind of looked at, well, we need to treat for like a mental health, like a depression or anxiety, instead of maybe a physiological perspective. So there's a whole bunch of information coming out in this broadcast, and I'm going, wow, I'm kind of intrigued in this, and like, how can I help out? Because part of my background, I have experience in terms of helping out in terms of functional movement, which is really important. Part of my courses, one of them is functional hormone educator as well. So it's kind of like, okay, so this is really hormones as a whole will influence that, because I have a lot of family members, aunts and uncles. I have big family. I'm French Canadian, so I'm just kidding. But that said, it's people in my life as well are getting into that age range, and even never mind being female, I'm also getting older, and hormones affect guys as well. And there's actually a male side of the menopause world as well that guys may not talk so much about either. But there's some of the similar symptomology as what guys may have that females may have, kind of menopause, andropause. And one of my colleagues in the UK, he actually teaches about andropause as well. So looking at the male component of it as well. Actually, in the group that we're both part of, the menopause experts group, he's out in the UK and teaches about that. So
interesting.
So kind of there's similarities for sure that way. So coming back to it in terms of menopause, I'm going, okay, well, how much in Canada, right? And I was kind of going, probably like more than a handful. I'm going, okay, what? Because our population is not super big. So I'm going, what, 2 million, 3 million? But then all of a sudden the stats come out, it's like 10 million women in Canada. I go, wow.
10 million. Yeah.
10 million. It's like, whew. Okay, so now from what that doctor in Toronto is saying, it's like access to services, access to support, access to how can I help out? And especially as things have shifted because of the pandemic, we could have more reach online as well. And then I kind of did a stat for globally, and it's at the time when I did my research is 1.6 billion women in the world who are in the menopause age range. I go, wow, that's huge. So even to have a small dent in that, how could I help out in terms of, well, I'm trained in specialist in functional pelvic floor. And I'm going, okay, I'm trained in the functional hormone educator. So we're kind of looking more at different health lifestyle factors and also nutrition that way. And then it's kind of like going, okay, well, yeah, like movement as a whole is really important, because we may have those, maybe 5 common symptoms of menopause that people really think about, like the hot flashes or the mood swings, or sorry, that's my top 2. So you may have a little bit more. But when the Menopause Foundation of Canada kind of laid out some stuff, and I actually did some other research, it's like, wow, we need to actually look out for cardiovascular health, because you're changing the hormone levels. You need to look at bone health as well, because you're changing the hormone levels as well. So in terms of my background, it's like, wow, like that's where the exercise really kicks in. And because we could kind of do stuff to keep the cardiovascular health going. You could do some stuff to keep the bone health going as well, because one of the big ways to do bone health is actually to do resistance training or muscular conditioning, because the muscles will help out for the bones to be healthy as well as you do that. But then if there's in the population of women going on, Menopause Foundation of Canada said, well, it's a quarter of the women who are also still working.
Yes.
So now it's, okay, how do you, okay, you're working, but you also may be running a family. You may be doing a whole bunch of on boards of different things with volunteer time. So how do you sneak in time for you time to do some physical activity? And that's where I thought I could kind of blend in some of that coaching for sure from my background in terms of kinesiology, medical exercise specialist, also certified brain health trainer. So yeah, I have a few credentials going on, but it's also with things I also found later with the Gynecological Society of Canada. Hopefully I'm saying that right. Correct me if I'm wrong with your background. So it was kind of cool because actually this past March in Banff, they actually did a conference. I looked at their agenda and I go, this is kind of cool, because they actually spent a good half day looking at menopause. So granted, it was OBY focused, right? And they're surgeons, so there's some of that, but they're actually looking at some things that way. But I'm going, okay, so that's a very medical approach, but where's the health and lifestyle approach as well? Where's the rehab approach? Where's the functional pelvic floor? And kind of touch on that, as we're aging, there's going to be changes in the pelvic floor because there's GSM. So it's called genitourinary syndrome of menopause. And it's a collection of symptoms to changes that might be happening in and around the pelvic floor area, if that's correct from your background. Correct me as we go along.
So my background more is that I'm a generalist of all, an expert of none.
Okay.
I put my clients in touch with the experts in the field. So in fact, when I have women come to me that are complaining about either prolapse or urinary incontinence and other pain in that area, I would be putting them in touch with someone with you.
Okay, gotcha.
But it's funny that you should ask, because just recently, just to expand in my knowledge and my network of individuals who I can reach out to and tap into for their knowledge, I had just recently took up a membership with, and you said it was the Canadian Society for the Advancement of Gynecological Excellence. I believe that's what you were referring to. Yeah. And they are putting on a lot more conferences so that we can spread the knowledge and unpack the truth and debunk the myths and misunderstandings surrounding women's health, menopause, and as we age, and it's from the perspective of the Gynecological Society, so that they can, because they should be the experts in the field, right? These people should be, this profession should be totally on board with menopause. But some of the statistics, and I'm glad that you mentioned statistics already, Francois, there are statistics out there too, pointing to less than 20% of OBGYNs in their schooling, just in their schooling, had any exposure to menopause as being like a lesson plan or a module.
Oh, wow.
And if they did, it was perhaps just one lesson. So these are OBGYNs that you would think, okay, they're going to be working with the women throughout their whole reproductive years, if you will. And that's actually how I became a menopause doula, because the Menopause Training Center in Canada, the director at the time, Sean C. King, created the program because she was a birthing doula, and she found that her patients, as they went through the reproductive years and then were getting older, were coming back to her and saying, okay, I've had my children and now I'm going through this new phase of my life. What's going on with me? And so she created a program to fill that gap, that gap that has been identified here in Canada, it's worldwide, that there's just not enough experts in the field, let alone the knowledge of the experts who are somewhat remotely tied to women's health. So the work that you're doing, which is why I'm so happy to have you talk about it, it just complements it. You have just
Awesome.
taken
Thanks.
your education, and your expertise that much further to deal with a
Mhm.
whole entire demographic that just seems to be left out in the dust,
Yeah.
if you will.
It's interesting how you mentioned about how that was addressed in terms of the menopause aspect of the doula from somebody who saw that through hanging out with women through their lifespan in terms of, hey, from being pregnant to delivery. And part of my functional pelvic floor was developed by a OB/GYN surgeon in the States,
Okay.
30 plus years, who was kind of going, we need to do more, because in my experience of helping women with delivery, there's awesome that there's the delivery and all that, but there's also the focus of, well, that's kind of like a trauma, positive, right? So don't get me wrong, positive trauma, but we need some rehab, because the surgeon, also a guy who developed this, the functional pelvic floor, he said, like, if we do a knee injury or a back injury or a shoulder, we're going to get rehab for that. Or we're going to think about the rehab stream.
Right.
So how come we're not thinking about the rehab stream for post-pregnancy?
Yes.
Because there's something happened in the pelvic floor, because it really depends on, for example, not every woman will have, let's say vehicles as an analogy. When we go buy a vehicle of a certain brand and model, we know what we're getting. But in terms of delivery, we're not going to get the same 6-pound kid coming out, that kind of thing, right? So, I'm making the generalization, so my apologies in advance. But there's so much of the variety and the range, and so even that said, so that's why he developed the whole. It's called pfilAtes. So it's kind of borrowing a little bit of the Pilates world and a little bit of the functional aspect as well that we'll be doing. And there's also a plyometric aspect of it, because in the exercise, there's a little bit of a plyometric or a quick tempo aspect of it to really kind of fire off indirectly getting involved into the pelvic floor. So I know with some of my clients, I had to actually retrain the breathing to kind of connect, because it's when we're doing, for example, one of the exercises is a bridge. So hopefully a lot of people know about bridges through yoga or Pilates or even spinal stability rehab. So when you're hanging out in the bridge pose, it's actually, you start at the top of the movement, and then you lower your hips maybe 2 to 3 inches. So sorry, I'm doing inches and not doing metric like here in Canada. So just quicker and easier. So we kind of lower.
I think our generation is kind of like we border on the 2 centimeters, inches.
So we kind of drop the hips a little ways, right? Maybe 3 inches kind of thing. And then from there, it's really thinking, that's the inhale part. And then as we bring the hips back up to the top phase, that's where we do that little quick percussive breath of really quick to really engage a lot of like the glutes, the adductors, the transverse abdominis muscle group, to really help out to engage a lot more. And granted, there would be a G ball between the knees as well to really condition through the adductors. So we're getting a lot of the muscle groups that attach into the hips, like the adductor muscle groups, the quads, the hamstrings, the glutes, and that transverse muscle group, and kind of firing off all in one. And that will kind of indirectly influence the pelvic floor.
The pelvic floor. This is quite fascinating, because I love to do bar, and I taught bar as a bar instructor, which is a nice blend of ballet infused with Pilates infused with yoga. And we are always engaging the core, saying, zip up the pelvic floor like you're holding in that P, draw the lower belly in and up, squeeze through the glutes, relax the shoulders down, and then gripping of the thighs, depending whether we're doing a seat or a thigh exercise. And it's true. I have seen the results. My clients have actually, or the participants have told me the results, saying, I just feel so much stronger in my hips, and I feel like I can open up through the hips so much more. And I never even related it to pelvic floor therapy in terms of post-pregnancy or the menopausal changes that shift the health of the pelvic floor. But I'm glad that you're mentioning that, because that just kind of validates some of those exercises that I've been preaching
awesome.
and promoting. Yeah. But could I go back and ask you, though, what happens when we have that hormone shift and estrogen declines? What is actually going on from a medical standpoint with the pelvic floor?
So pelvic floor, so because I brought up GSM, so it's like a group of symptoms, like I kind of mentioned. So that can be occurring because of the decrease of estrogen levels during or after menopause. So it could be like, because stages of menopause, we have the perimenopause, menopause, and postmenopause, kind of the general three. So there'll be the changes in the estrogen levels for sure. And that changes could lead to some of the symptoms, kind of like you kind of mentioned, some bladder issues or some urinary issues. They could even look at some discomfort during intercourse with partner.
Absolutely.
As well. So there could be a whole bunch of things like that, or even UTIs and etc. Yeah. Typically, going to see a physician is always a good thing to do, to kind of follow the roll call method, I'll say. Just kind of, okay, how do I need to know how to deal with this. So yeah, it might be a family physician who might do the referral to the gynecologist. But then through that, it might be like moistures or lubricants to help out with that, because I know some of my friends are pelvic physios, and kind of like, so that's kind of some of their stuff that they might look at. So creams, tablets, or stuff like that to help out with, just to restore the tissues. But there's also like that lifestyle modifications to help out with the whole genital urinary health as well. So for example, we might look at the different foods, the sleep, or whatever else, and definitely some, like through the OBY, there might be some work with a pelvic physio as well. But that's also might not be accessible to a lot of people. And that's where a lot of stuff is like, well, what can we do in terms of like a functional pelvic floor? And I think that's kind of helps out for sure. Because I know with what the group I'm involved with for pfilAtes, is kind of like, well, we could do some stuff, and as short as, 1 month, there could be some changes.
Beautiful.
So, and like a lot of times people, it's like, especially in the rehab world, it's like, oh man, it's going to take me 12 weeks. Like, what the heck? A lot of this stuff is really super short, because with Dr. Crawford, who founded the pfilAtes, there's a lot of stuff like he actually measured, and there's a lot of stuff in terms of the exercises that are used and done. It was tested as well in terms for recruitment and everything else. So there's a couple different ways in terms of, how can you help out with bladder control, because it's a weak pelvic floor. So let's do some exercises to help out. And granted, sometimes it's Kegels, but sometimes Kegel exercises are not the end all and be all either. We kind of want to have a good blend of different exercises that are coming in, because it's, for example, the pfilAtes differs from Kegels because it's more about movement that targets the pelvic floor muscles, that also tones the muscle groups that are associated, that come into the hips. So for example, in the bridge, you're kind of toning the glutes, right? Because that's a big driver for that exercise, is the glutes. You're kind of toning the hamstrings as well. The quads will be involved. And because there's a ball between the knees, your adductor muscle groups will be involved as well. So you're kind of getting all those muscle groups involved in one movement, as well as you're kind of going through the exercise. And because the other part is, like I kind of mentioned, is using kind of that plyometrics for fast, powerful movement, kind of like that percussive breath of when, for example, going to the top of the movement of the bridge is doing the inhale, then that quick, and that really helps to kind of do that more fast, quick, powerful movement. That helps to improve the performance of those muscle groups as well, because you're also, it's like, hey, I'm hitting that switch, that on switch even quicker.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Interesting. And does that have a lot to do with, like, on the exhale, we tend to draw the belly in too? Is that kind of like that snap of the belly helps tighten that low transverse abdominal muscle group kind of idea?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I was going through the course for the Pilates, um, it kind of almost boiled down to how can we do this in a short amount of time? So, like I said, 4 weeks, and there's different levels for sure. And we might start at what's something that you could do nice and easily. So, with some of my clients, we might start with 2 movements. It's like, hey, how's that going? And then when we see each other next time, oh, it's going really well. Great. Let's add two more. Because sometimes when we add too many exercises, it's easy to not do any because it's like,
Yes.
hey, I'm busy. I got my work life. I got this life. I got running my kids to X, Y, and Z as well. So there's a lot of stuff going on. So how am I
Yeah.
going to carve out? It's like, Francois is like, no, I'm not carving out 2 hours for exercise. It's like, but I don't want you to either. So a lot of
Yeah.
the stuff in the Pilates could actually be, hey, can I do 5 minutes in the morning? Can I do 5 minutes in the evening? Like, so can I link that into my morning or evening routine? Awesome. Right. And it might just be, you know, we might be hanging out together and say, hey, Mary, let's start with, even while you're hanging out on your bed, can you just do 5 reps of this type of bridge?
Okay. Yeah.
Right. So it's like, oh, hey, I done 5 reps. Great, done deal. And oh, I'm going to do that again this evening.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm not asking you to carve out like a lot of time out of your day because like you're on the go
Yeah.
kind of person.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's just like little baby steps, like
Oh,
introduce a little bit of a time, a little bit of time, and
oh, totally. Right. So
yeah.
it's very much that for sure because it is a combination of type of exercises where it's like I've done the bridge for a little while. Let me change or add on a different exercise because my brain's getting used to it. And sometimes to change the exercise is good for brain health as well. And now
Ah,
it might
true.
be, hey, let's do the Vomer exercise. So the Vomer is might be same thing. Mary, just you could hang it on your bed, but I want you in that, like a high kneeling position or a kneeling position, and then you just drop your hips down. Same thing, kind of like a half sit, inhale, but then on the way up, that's where you do that to full kneel position. As you come up, is that quick breath because then that's you're drawing that navel again. You gotta hit the toning into the glutes. You're gonna hit the quads for sure because the kneeling on the bed, your knees are anchored, so you might feel a little bit of draw of your knees together, and that'll kind of tie in the adductors.
Oh, interesting. My goodness. And apart from pelvic floor health, it's overall good stability, mobility, and
Oh,
strengthening bones.
oh, totally right. Because you're kind of
Yeah.
doing a little bit of concentric, a little bit of isometric muscle strength
Okay.
with around the bones, and you're also targeting some of those muscle groups that get it insertion points right in and around the knee and around the hip as well, and especially glutes. We get into the low back for sure.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so there's a lot of good benefits of that Pilates program where it's been researched. It's been here's like the top 10 exercises to do, and when I work with people with specific or functional pelvic floor stuff, we'll do outcome measures. So we'll kind of do something like, let's say if there's bladder concerns, we'll do
Yeah.
like a bladder form. Hey, here's a bladder checklist, for like a better word. Where are you at now? Let's do some of this stuff. Let's kind of do a reevaluation 4 weeks later to see
Oh,
where you're at.
nice.
So
Okay.
at least there's outcomes that's kind of like, how do I know this working? So there is kind
Okay.
of a way to track it as well.
Okay. And if they're not hitting those benchmark milestones in their progress, do you say to them, hey, I know you're not doing your morning bridge?
It might be, how's it going? Like, and
Yeah.
sometimes it's really looking at, from my perspective, are there barriers, right?
Ah,
Are there barriers to doing the exercise? It's like, okay, great. Like you have this for work, but you're not home till 9 o'clock. You feel exhausted. I gotta still prep my supper or whatever else. Or yeah, it might be depend on your work role as well. Because if you're in shift work, that's a little bit different, right? So it's really more how can we tie it into part of your day, and it becomes more of a routine.
right. So it's not just all about sitting at your desk at work or driving in the car and doing Kegels. It's
Yeah.
not that at all. Although, what is the role that Kegels plays?
So there is a role for Kegels, but it's just sometimes it's a lot of it. For example, one of my big reasons of why I got into the functional pelvic floor specialist course is that at the time when I rolled in, I was actually looking at what's going on in the prostate cancer world. And
Yes.
it's kind of the rehab, and the folks in the UK, they do really good stuff for the rehab. And I'm going, wow, it's like when I was looking through their kind of protocol stuff, I'm going, you do a lot of Kegels. I'm going, well, okay, I think you could do more than just Kegels. And because sometimes even this Kegel coaching is kind of tough in of itself. When I found out about the pfilAtes and the functional pelvic floor, I'm going, okay, this makes more sense to me because it's functional. Because we walk every day, we go up and down stairs, we sit on a chair, we stand up. So that's a squat. When we go up and down stairs, that's kind of modified lunges. Or we actually walk, that's baby lunges to me.
True.
And then we manage a curb, so we kind of have to do a inclined raise type of lunge to some degree. So it's very much more functional in a way. And the fact that it kind of borrows from the world of Pilates a little bit as well, it's kind of really neat because Pilates is a lot through the core. And anytime we do any movement, there a lot of that transfers through the core. So everyday movement, push, pull, lift, carry. Or now we're doing stuff like, hey, I want to go for a hike, or I want to go, I'll pick Vancouver Island because where you're hanging out there. It's awesome for kayaking. But if I'm going kayaking, there's a lot, like the paddle stroke is through the core as well.
Yes.
To some degree, right? To kind of get a bit more propulsion. Like you could do arms only, but your arms going to tire out really quick. Yes. But if you do it a bit more efficiently, it's like everything is the whole technique is through core.
That's so true.
So, and then if we're going grocery shopping, it's like I'm pushing a shopping cart. I gotta be engaging my core.
Yeah. And well. Not leaning on the shopping cart to drag you down the aisles.
or even carrying that grocery cart or box kind of thing.
Yeah.
I need to engage my core because I can't be leaning to one side. My core has to be engaged to keep me upright.
Very interesting. Yeah. I'm about to engage in an arm stand course. I've always wanted to do more arm stands.
Okay.
In yoga and how to get the legs up to the side and that. And our preliminary warm-up work, it's all about engaging the core. As much as it looks about arm strength, it isn't. It's about stacking the joints over the wrist effectively and engaging through the core and also pulling that low abdominal muscle group in. So true.
For sure. So like the whole the whole functional pelvic floor really fits in really nicely because we engage a lot of the bigger muscle groups that kind of tag into the hips that influence the pelvic floor for sure.
So, and that's very interesting then why this rehab after pregnancy would make so much more sense because our core muscle groups, they just, a lot of the women will get the separation too of the abdominal wall. And the name is escaping me right now. It starts with a D. And where you have to strengthen the muscles because they have that separation and that whole area just becomes so weak for many women, not just a few months after pregnancy, but this could go on for years, if not decades.
For sure. And then if you look at, depending on when also having children, if it's a little bit later, and is that getting close to now, hey, I just had a kid and now I'm almost transitioning to that perimenopause, right? So the transition time might be a little bit quicker.
So true.
In a way, right? So, but then it's like, oh, hey, no, this is just because I just had a child. But yes, but there might be some of the, well, granted, even in that world, there's a hormone shifts for sure. But now at what age? Because sometimes in generations, are we waiting a little bit longer to have children? And so now are you getting a little bit closer towards the menopause years, like from perimenopause to menopause? So kind of like what you mentioned a little bit now, does that pelvic floor health get extended a little bit down the road a little bit further?
Yes. Interesting. I want to talk about, I find this all quite fascinating. Diastasis recti, that's what it's called. Yeah. Sorry, I just had to throw it in. Diastasis recti. Yeah. Menopause brain, I forget my words. I really want to tie in about the core strength and pelvic health strength, not so much, or very much so the pelvic floor therapy. But let's talk about bone density loss and the high risk of hip fractures and what that can
Yeah.
do to quality of life.
Yeah, no, for like kind of we kind of indirectly talked about or directly talked about, because as you're going through menopause as well, there's going to be all those hormone changes that are going on. There's going to be losses or gains, and then definitely in terms of two big things that are maybe not thought of as forefront in terms of the symptomology, that cardiovascular health and that bone health. So in terms of the bone health, a lot of the research shows, can you do weight training or resistance training? So a lot of people say, well, that means I got to go to the gym. Not necessarily. There's ways you could do a lot of stuff in terms of resistance training. I know some of my clients, they like the gym because that's their motivation. They need to see or hear people that are doing kind of similar, and that's their way out, and that's great. Like, don't get me wrong. So I don't discourage gym stuff, but if that's not your bread and butter kind of thing for motivation, you could also do stuff at home. But then sometimes that's where motivation kind of, it's like, I could slack off a little bit more too. So body weight exercises are a good way to start. I was working with a client. We were doing some stuff for planks, and then we always think about planks as traditional, get on the floor, kind of hold the push-up stance as a plank. But I actually showed her we could do planks off the wall, and she's going, "Oh, I didn't know about this." I said, "Well, yeah, it's just kind of, but now I have a load on my arm and my shoulder, and that's doing some isometric work. And now if I go to my forearm, I'm kind of doing a plank push-up, so I'm bending through my elbow. So I'm kind of changing the muscle groups a little bit as well." It's like, well, hey, we could hang out on the plank and also do kind of like a mountain core exercise as well, or a spider kind of core exercise. And she's going, wow, this is kind of, pulling the knees in or outside of the shoulder.
Or on the outs. Yeah. Okay.
And she's going, wow, this is kind of cool. I didn't know about this. It's like, thanks, right? Because there's so many different ways you could actually engage in terms of doing exercise. So you could kind of use floors, body weight, walls. You could definitely do TheraBand as well. So kind of like that elastic stretching that gives different resistance, and also just hand weights too. Yeah. So there's a lot of different ways, but then that said, I know in the health and wellness world, there's where do I start? Yes. And sometimes that's nice to kind of, you mentioned you've done bar stuff. You could definitely attend classes if that's kind of something to kind of get somebody started, because sometimes the classes are anywhere from 6 classes long to 8 classes long. It could be like, for example, functional pelvic floor. It might be, my base is 4 weeks. Let's start at 4 weeks. So let's reevaluate. Do we need to kind of modify some stuff? Yeah. Right. So some of those programs could be 4 weeks long. I know, for example, in health and fitness websites and or magazines, a lot of the sample programs that they give is 4 weeks long. Is kind of get going, get started.
Just to get you started.
Yeah, get going on 4 weeks. And then to tailor some stuff, it might be a little bit longer, because physiology-wise, to really notice change is usually 12 weeks.
Okay.
There might be stuff that happens from 0 to 12 weeks, but usually the bigger change is at 12 weeks.
Okay.
In terms of like a physiology perspective.
Okay. But is it true that within that first 4 weeks, or even maybe the first 21 days, there's a mind shift change, and that's what's key to keep you motivated?
Oh yeah, for sure. There's going to be that, because then you're into the habit, for lack of a word, right? So you're into the habit. You're kind of going, I could see how this fits in. Maybe it's an adjustment for, can I get up 15 minutes earlier? I with some of my clients, it's time. I don't have time. And I said, well, what if I show you a 5-minute core exercise? It's like, seriously, you could do core exercise in 5 minutes? I said, yeah. So I have a whole way to approach exercise of, we could do something in 5 minutes. We could do a kind of a circuit for lower body in 15 minutes. We could do, so there's ways to construct that. And that's ideally where, instead of feeling overwhelmed, that's where you kind of actually want to hang out with a coach for a little while.
Okay. Yeah.
That might be a benefit for sure.
Absolutely. And we'll make sure that we get all your coaching programs or your links to your programs in the show notes.
Oh, thank you.
And and your clinic. And I do want to draw attention to the name of the clinic, the Other Pain Clinic.
Yeah.
So tell us the story behind the name.
I was actually walking the older dog, and I kind of going, something was just kind of bouncing around in my head, and I'm going, okay, there's got to be another approach, right? So I was kind of playing around with some names and kind of walking with the dog and started going, hey, what about the Other Pain Clinic? It just kind of, I kind of ran it through a couple of my friends, and they're going, it kind of creates a little bit of curiosity. It's like, what are you doing differently, right? And actually, even through the whole, from that onset of the name to now, there's always evolutions, because I'm even looking at how do I do chronic pain differently. And actually, one of my big approaches will be look at the hormones and kind of do a hormone checklist in terms of, with some of my new clients coming on board, it's like, okay, hey, let me send you this big hormone checklist. It's a big overview. It's detailed, and it's very subjective as to when you fill it out, but at least it gives you a snapshot of where you at. Because like, I know we get, if we ask, we could get blood tests for hormones, and I know there's the Dutch testing, I believe, as well.
Test, yeah.
And there's another test that you could order. Definitely, like the Dutch test is something that you would order, kind of like the ancestry test. Ideal. So you kind of order it, you kind of submit it, and yeah, exactly, something along those lines. Yeah, exactly. So it's something along that. So that might not be covered under a regular medical visit per se. But if somebody wants a little bit more detailed stuff, they could definitely order stuff like that. But at least it kind of gives a little bit more of a profile. And my checklist is basically, it just asks the questions of, for example, energy fatigue. Some of them are, there might be some other questions in there, but it's like A through J. And then under each category, there's about 10 sub question check boxes. If you check those off and then you do a total score, then it kind of gives you an idea of, are you low in this? Are you high in this? So it's kind of a neat thing. And that's through my functional hormone educator. And that's where that kind of came up in my course there. And that's part of my course package. So
that sounds really informative. One of the things that I do outside of these tests, like you said, is in the lab testing, is just to have the patients track their cycle. If they're still cycling, or if they're not, but just track how they're feeling at certain phases. What was their diet like? What was their intake of food, even alcohol? Did they get some exercise, or sleep pattern? All of it. I mean, we map it all out.
Yeah,
because it gives them a sense of, taking agency over their own hormone changes. Yeah,
and I think that's a big part of it. And what's really neat with that, like in my functional hormone educator part, we do tag into health, lifestyle stuff, and nutrition. And there's actually like a 7-day piece in that whole thing that it's like, oh, hey, let me send you the recipes. Let me send you the grocery list that you need for your 7-day kind of hormone reset. Because sometimes that's kind of a really neat thing to do. And I warn some of my clients who I've given this to, I said, your first couple of days, you might get bored with the foods, but it's basically you're think about it this way. It's a reset. Right. So we're kind of establishing similar stuff. And then we're going to, like, the next, 4 days or 3 days, then we're going to add different recipes in there. So, and this is all in the program, is all done with the registered holistic nutritionist dietitians. So it's all that collaboration. And it's just more of, hey, this is really cool. It was a very nice kind of, let's get a lot of professionals together in on this.
I love that. Grouping together shared expertise that have, crossover. We cover a myriad of fields and therapies that all relate to one particular health situation, which is hormones, menopause.
Yeah, and it's really important, because like even like who we're both associated with, the menopause experts group, they talk about nutrition a lot as well, and how that's really important in terms of the menopause role. Because if we're super busy, and if we're always having, like, maybe not by intentional choice, but it's like, this is what we have for right now, a little bit more of the pro-inflammatory foods, that might set off some other related symptoms that might be happening, right? So it might just be, like, don't get me wrong, like, food is food. We need a fuel source, But as one of my good friends, a registered dietitian out of Newfoundland, said, we could always improve the food intake, right? So it's kind of, and granted, like I know when I travel, I'm going, okay, I'm in the airport. This is my choices. This is what I'm kind of limited to as well. So it's kind of, yeah, I need some food. So yeah, here I go.
Yeah, which is my
So
best
it's,
option.
yeah, exactly. So,
And
but yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
glad you did bring up the menopause expert group. That was the next area I wanted to broach and talk more about. And this is how you and I crossed each other's
Yeah.
paths, was through the menopause expert group and in their private Facebook group, and becoming menopause champions,
Hmm.
which we now are. So tell the listeners your journey to become this champion with the menopause expert group. How did you find them in the first place? And
Yeah, basically, I think a lot of it was kind of, I mentioned before, like, is that news article that I got interested in the menopause stuff, and I'm going, well, with what I have in my skill toolbox, I could definitely help out, but it'd be nice to find who else is doing that. So I think I was starting to research menopause clinics in Canada or something like that, and then definitely once you start to search for things, you notice a lot more of that coming into your social network to
yes,
some degree. Let's put it that way.
artificial intelligence just makes it
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, exactly. So I kind of go, oh, hey, menopause experts group, what are these guys about? Right. So I kind of looked into it and then I go, wow, this is really neat because they're really looking at what I believe in as well. They're looking at more than just medication, more than just like, yeah, we'll talk about the hormone replacement therapy, and that's part of that world. It is part of it, but they're looking beyond that as well because they're looking at what's the mindset as well because the founder of the menopause experts group, I believe her background is psychology
That's right.
with D, right? So like she spends a lot of time in the mindset piece, which is really good because I think that's really important. And then there's that whole nutrition piece, and which I find really fascinating because I know from my work world in terms of health conditions and chronic pain, nutrition is super important. And I like how they were looking at nutrition in certain foods that could help out with estrogen or whatever your hormones are. And that really complements my course as a functional hormone educator. Let me get that right.
Yeah.
Because we looked at food a lot in that world as well. Because, like I mentioned, that 7-day hormone reset, it's all about, hey, here's the recipes, here's the groceries to go get. So it's kind of really neat about what are some foods that can actually help me out. And
Mm-hmm.
then they also look at the health lifestyle piece. And I think that's really important in terms of because it's stress or it's
Yes.
anxiety or depression. So those are the big three key ones that could really do an effect on the nervous system. Because definitely on the stress part, if we're always in high stress, then what's the cortisol levels doing in the body in terms of the hormones? And
Totally.
so it's kind of neat. So like, is there some strategies to do like mind body resets? So I'll throw that in there too, because like to keep everything short, kind of like that functional pelvic floor stuff, 4 weeks, it's 30 days. So I even look at the, hey, 30 days of a mind body reset. And it's kind of
Totally.
nicely coached as well, because I know some of my clients did that and going, wow, this is something I really needed.
Yes.
It's kind of um, different approaches, kind of different strategies. And some of it's personalized because I think everybody kind of has a different approaches. And a lot of my stuff has to be personalized as well. And I think that you get better results that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. So no doubt having that licensed menopause champion endorsement to add to your repertoire,
Yeah.
several certifications.
Yeah.
What does this now give you the
It gives
credentials to do?
it gives me more um what I like. It gives me they have a great library of resources, and it really
Absolutely.
helps me out to be more confident in approaching either working with individuals one-on-one or in small groups. I'm actually somebody out of our May group of the UK said, "Hey, can I get the male perspective on it?" So I'm going to be tagging in with her
That's
because
awesome.
which is I think is awesome that she's doing that because it's also it's helping out in that respect in terms of relationships because it's like sometimes it's like hey how can guys understand that and actually I'm gonna be looking at maybe this summer I'm going to see where, because I'm actually want to do a podcast about to help out guys to understand menopause and what every guy,
Menopause, or what you call the
so what every guy,
andropause.
actually, it's more about, for example, it's like, what do I need to do as a partner to understand what's kind of going on in her world, and what do I need to do? So I like cooking, right? So I'm going, hey, great, I could lay out the foods that way, or something like
That's
that, right?
so
So it's kind of
okay.
my podcast is going to be something more about menopause decoded, what every guy needs to know, something along those lines.
I
So
am
it's
so
gonna be
excited,
fun.
Francois. 100%.
So it'll
Yes.
be kind of a
And
fun
interview
thing.
my husband on that one too,
Yeah,
would you?
okay, I will for sure. Um,
Oh, fantastic.
but yeah, that menopause experts group is really nice because it's a great plug in terms of they have great content. It's up to speed. I could, even in our group, it's you could ask a question, somebody will help you out.
That's so fantastic.
So
Yeah,
it's kind of nice that way. And then,
it
like I
is.
said, resource wise, it helps as a business owner, it helps save time for me because they have great resources where I don't really have to go onto, let's say, Google or wherever else to do my other searches for publications. So it's time saving. It's awesome
Yeah.
that way. So
Yeah.
the connections is fabulous. For like globally, it's like wow. It's like I mentioned, I forget his name, but he's in the UK, and a lot of his presentations is combined of menopause and andropause. And I remember I did a small presentation to a small group here in Calgary, which I kind of tested things out in the group. I'm talking about menopause, and that there's actually one guy in there, and he was like, "Going, yeah, like I'm low on testosterone, so I need to go in for my shots." But one of my slides was actually looking at similarities and symptoms between menopause and andropause, and there's some that
Oh,
are
that's
very,
great.
very, very similar, but then there's a couple ones that are a little bit different just because of gender.
Yeah, yes, this is so true. My husband reminds me of that too. He says, I understand, and it's quite significant for the female. And you've educated me so much because of the significant role that estrogen, and in particular estradiol, plays in our brain health. But he says, for us guys with testosterone levels declining, we go through it too.
Mm-hmm.
And we might not experience the same things in terms of the impact of the brain, but he says, let me tell you how demoralizing it is for the guy to see his chest shrink in, his muscles just deteriorate in his shoulders, like all that physical stamina that the gladiator man used to have. And then just with a decline in testosterone alone, no lifestyle changes whatsoever, but just that alone, it just kind of takes away their stature, like if you will,
Mm-hmm.
from a physical standpoint. And he tells me this, and it's eye-opening and educational for me too. And it's coming from that place of empathy, like seek first to understand before being understood. So having that perspective is fulfilling and enriching for me as well as a menopause doula too, because I realize, you know what, the man goes through it too, the marriage, the relationship goes through it too. So just
Yeah.
having that broader perspective. And so
And
just
and I
being able to
think
tap in.
like what you said, Mary, it's like in terms of that's a change without the lifestyle added in, right? But now if you add the, hey, how do I complement my lifestyle to delay that, or not really delay it, but kind of reduce the impact of it? I'll
True.
say. Then
Yeah.
it's like, oh, hey, I got to make sure, I'm on top of my game for my physical health. So what is that?
Yeah.
It's my cardio, it's my muscle strength, it's my nutrition, my sleep, because sleep is restore, repair, rebuild as well, right? So like
That's right.
four big things, but everybody will have a different approach to it as well.
Yeah. The
Yeah,
mindfulness work. And you mentioned earlier that cortisol level and getting our stress levels down.
yeah.
This has been a really action-packed, informative,
No, likewise. Same
educational.
with yourself.
I'm thrilled that make this connection. I see many more opportunities to bring you back to talk some more, to explore how we
Oh,
both, as licensed menopause experts, can broaden the education and the awareness across the country.
yeah, no, for sure. I think we could definitely do some stuff, or even some specific things. Like I know here in Calgary, I did a podcast with a local bar who had actually a podcast studio in it, and we actually looked at So it's cool setup. We actually looked at the menopause and breast cancer kind of thing because it's
Oh,
that time of the month, right? So we kind of did a little piece on that. So it's like
that is
that's kind of
so
really cool.
informative and definitely, yeah. No stone unturned. It's all things
Yeah,
menopausal, right?
for sure.
So let our listeners know where they can find you.
Sure. Where they can find me. So you kind of mentioned my unique name, theotherpainclinic.com. I do have in there a piece, if you actually extend that to / pelvic floor, then that's you could find a little bit more stuff about the pelvic floor exercise rehab. Yeah, that's probably the best place to find me. And I have a contact page in there as well, a little bit about my interests and how I want to help people out. Because I think my big drive is to give hope. And that's brought up by one of my coaches. And for me, that's help one person every day.
That's wonderful.
And I think from what we shared, like I think this could really help out many people along the
It
ways
absolutely can.
of more. It's like, oh, there's more to it. What I could do to help out in terms of my menopause journey.
Yes. Yes. Well, we'll get that in the show notes. Thank you very much for all what you shared. I always like to end with one question, although it always drives more conversation. But what are you reading these days? What is your favorite book, or what is a book that you highly recommend that you have so much pleasure in and need to share?
um, what am I reading now? I'm actually reading a Instagram how to set up your Instagram for your business book. So that's my
Oh,
technical book. My fun book, I'm actually reading Poke the Box by Seth Godin.
yeah. Oh, yes. Okay.
So because I kind of like that because he makes me think a little bit differently about, for example, what we just shared, like in menopause, like there is the traditional treatment approach, but by poking the box, it's like now, hey, hang on, wait, how do I manage the stress? How do I do this? And I think that's really, kind of get people to think a little bit differently, hopefully, about the menopause journey. So
Perfect way to end. We'll get that in the show notes. Thank you
yeah,
so much, Francois. I've enjoyed our time together, and
it's
I look
been
forward to.
very thankful for our time together today on a weekend day here as well. So it's a pleasure. And yeah, I look forward to kind of sharing some more thoughts about what we could do.
Absolutely, for sure. That was such a great conversation with Francois. I want to just go right to the last question I asked him. That was, what book was he reading today, these days, that he would recommend for others? And he had mentioned Seth Godin, Poke the Box. So apropos. With PR, we say think outside the box. And I'm sure everybody uses that terminology. The idea behind it is that if you want to be innovative, you've just got to think differently, expand your horizons. And I love that it just is so fitting for Francois. He expanded horizons, poked around a little bit on the inkling that there was something that he could do as a functional pelvic floor specialist. And he looked into a menopause experts group. And lo and behold, here he is championing the cause. And as he said, his biggest mission is just to bring hope. If he can help one woman, he's doing his job. And that's really what it's all about. That's probably why I've just felt so gravitated to his energy. But some of the interesting things that I learned from him: functional hormone educator, the whole idea that functional health begins with looking at your lifestyle, making like just small changes, and in nutrition, which we spoke about in many episodes before, how our food plays such a significant role, and it shifts and changes with hormone fluctuations, and of course with its impact to our cortisol and our gut health. But just in being able to incorporate that and working with a coach such as Francois, who can just show small changes to make big impact. The whole idea of the pelvic floor health, so critical. But one thing I did learn was that the pelvic floor goes through a trauma. The pregnancy in itself, giving birth, is such a trauma. And as we think about an impact or a wound, a trauma, and like he said, we would work rehabilitation in a shoulder or a knee. But why aren't we doing that with the pelvic floor? And so, of course, as we age, that shifts and we see all kinds of symptoms such as urinary tract infections and dryness, vaginal atrophy. But by working with a combination of muscles that support the pelvic floor, you are effectively strengthening and rehabilitating that area. So if you want to work with a coach like Francois, check out Francois' website. You can find him at theotherpainclinic.com, and his course is theotherpainclinic.com/pelvic-floor. Always consult with your family physician, your healthcare practitioner if you're experiencing symptoms to the pelvic areas. Go get that checked out, talk to your doctor, and get the referral. Okay, my lovely listeners, it's been a pleasure bringing to you another informative, educational, aha moment episode. And until next week, this is All Things Menopausal. Thank you for tuning in to another insightful episode of All Things Menopausal. If you enjoyed today's episode and want to stay connected, be sure to follow me on Instagram for daily tips and updates. You can find me at m_l_coaching. For even more support and community, join our Facebook group, Personal and Universal, where we share experiences, advice, and empower each other through the transformative journey. And if you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving a review on Apple Podcasts. Your feedback helps reach more women who can benefit from these conversations. Okay, my lovelies, until next time, stay empowered, stay informed, and embrace the beauty of your menopausal journey. Remember, midlife should be the best life, and it will be. Namaste.